close your eyes and let the world fall away, as we journey to a forest of ancient whispers and timeless serenity. Imagine sunlight filtering through towering trees, weaving a tapestry of gold and green, where every rustle and murmur carries the secrets of a magical realm. Tonight, we'll step into a tale where courage meets enchantment, where flames tell stories and balance holds the key to peace. Let this story wrap around you like a warm, comforting blanket, guiding you gently into dreams of wonder and tranquility. The elven forest stood timeless and serene, as if cradled in an endless song of rustling leaves and murmuring streams. Sunlight filtered through the branches of towering trees, weaving a tapestry of gold and green on the forest floor. To those who knew it, this ancient woodland was more than a forest. It was a world of hidden wisdom and secret enchantments, watched over by guardians whose names had long faded into memory. But on this day, a strange, unsettling sound pierced the calm. The crackling and roar of fire, fierce and insistent, as if eager to consume everything in its path. The flames were not like any fire seen before. They did not spread with ordinary fury, nor could they be calmed with rain or soil. It seemed to pulse, shifting hues between blue, orange, and a deep crimson, feeding not on wood alone, but on something more profound, something magical, woven into the very essence of the forest. Word of the strange blaze spread quickly, reaching villages near and far. It was not long before a dwarf named Thrain heard of the forest's plight. Thrain was known in his land as a skilled craftsman, a miner, and a keeper of old tales, one who respected the ancient agreements between his kin and the elven folk. When news of the enchanted fire reached him, he felt an unfamiliar urgency pulling him toward the forest, a sense of duty that tugged at his spirit. The elven realm had often been mysterious and distant to him, yet he could not ignore the call. Upon reaching the forest's edge, Thrain could sense something strange in the air. The familiar scents of earth and foliage were tainted with smoke, and the quiet hum of life felt strained, as though the trees themselves were in pain. As he ventured deeper, Thrain saw the flames in the distance, glowing eerily against the shaded forest backdrop. They danced and swayed in patterns that seemed almost intentional, as if aware of his presence. The trees around the flames showed no ordinary signs of charring. Their trunks were marked with peculiar spirals and ancient runes, symbols of elven magic long forgotten, symbols Thrain could barely comprehend. He noticed that some of the elven elders stood nearby, eyes closed and hands lifted as they tried to chant the fire away. But their magic was no match for this blaze. The fire defied their spells, feeding instead off their attempts, growing brighter and fiercer. An elven maiden approached Thrain, her face shadowed by worry. Her silver hair caught the dim light, and her eyes reflected the fire's strange colors, as if it burned within her as well. "Dwarf," she said, her voice soft yet weighted. "This fire is unlike any we have known. It defies water and earth, and it drains the life from our forest with each breath. We have tried everything we know, but the fire answers to something beyond our realm." Thrain felt the weight of her words settle on him. He had seen many fires in his life. Those in the deep caverns, those used in the forges, those that warmed the halls of dwarven homes. But this was something different. The flames, it seemed, held a voice, an ancient whisper that echoed in his mind, drawing him closer yet filling him with a sense of foreboding. "Then what is to be done?" he asked, his voice steady, but edged with a concern he could not quite hide. "Surely, if no magic of yours can calm it, there must be another way." The elven maiden held his gaze, a glimmer of hope mingling with her sorrow. "There is a legend," she began slowly, as if speaking the words brought them closer to some unknown fate. "It speaks of a being who commands the fire, but is not consumed by it. A creature born of flame, hidden in the volcanic caverns to the east, where the forest and mountain meet. The Fireborn Dragon, it is called. A creature of heat and light, said to wield the flames as easily as we breathe the air." Thrain's heart stirred at the mention of the dragon. Dwarves and dragons had an old, turbulent history. Yet this was no ordinary dragon, bound by nature's law of fire and ash. A dragon that controlled flames without fear. This was a creature of legend, one that dwarves spoke of only in whispers around the deepest fires. "Would this dragon help us if it exists?" Thrain asked, his tone cautious, but filled with a rising determination. "Only one who proves their heart's loyalty to the forest might have a chance," she answered, her eyes reflecting the fire as though peering into its depths. "And that one may face trials beyond mortal strength. But if you are willing, brave dwarf, perhaps the dragon will answer." Thrain nodded, feeling the weight of the forest's plea settle upon him. He was but a dwarf, a craftsman of stone, yet something about this fire called to him, as if it knew his heart. He resolved then and there to seek the Fireborn Dragon, to ask for its aid in the hopes that together they could restore the forest's balance. With a final glance at the blazing trees and the determined faces of the elves, Thrain set off toward the volcanic caverns, his mind clouded with both fear and purpose, the fire's ominous whispers echoing in his thoughts. The path to the volcanic caverns was treacherous, winding through dense forest trails that twisted and turned as if designed to disorient travelers. Shadows clung to the underbrush, and the only sound was the crunch of Thrain's boots against the forest floor. He moved steadily, his heart pounding in a rhythm, both anxious and determined, for he sensed that each step brought him closer to a place untouched by the hands of time. As he neared the mountains, the air grew warmer, laden with the scent of sulfur and ash. Strange rocks jutted from the ground, darkened by old lava flows, and the once familiar green hues of the forest were replaced by shades of grey and deep burnt red. Thrain was not one to fear the earth's depths, yet the land here felt different, almost as if it pulsed with a heartbeat of its own. Finally, Thrain reached the entrance of the cavern, a jagged opening that yawned like the mouth of some ancient beast. Inside, shadows flickered in the distance, and the air was thick with heat. He hesitated only a moment before stepping in, gripping the hilt of his dagger as he descended into the darkness. The cavern walls glowed with veins of molten rock, casting a dim red light that danced and shimmered. Thrain could feel the heat pressing against him, but he pushed forward, drawn by an instinct deeper than fear. The deeper he went, the more he felt that he was not alone. The heat intensified, wrapping around him like an invisible cloak, and he knew then that he was entering the domain of the Fireborn Dragon. A low, rumbling sound filled the chamber, like thunder reverberating from the depths of the earth. Thrain looked up, and there, amidst a bed of lava pools and smouldering rock, lay the creature of legend, the Fireborn Dragon. Ignis, as he was called in ancient dwarven tales, was unlike any dragon Thrain had imagined. His scales glowed like metal fresh from the forge, shifting between hues of copper and crimson, each one edged with a faint shimmer of gold. His wings, folded tightly against his back, were translucent, and as he shifted, they revealed an intricate network of firelight within, like rivers of molten lava coursing through him. His eyes, twin embers of fierce intelligence, locked onto Thrain, with a gaze that was both curious and wary. Thrain felt the weight of those eyes on him, a heat that seemed to reach past his armor, past his flesh, probing the very core of his being. He could not look away, nor did he want to, for there was something in that gaze, a challenge, a question. Thrain knew that this creature, this Fireborn Dragon, was testing him. "Why have you come, dwarf?" Ignis's voice was like the rolling of distant thunder, low and resonant, carrying the scent of smoke and old secrets. Thrain stepped forward, his throat dry but his resolve firm. "The forest is burning, great dragon. A magical fire spreads, one that cannot be quenched by water or earth. The elves have tried, and they say only one born of fire could halt it. I was sent to find you, Ignis, to ask for your help." The dragon's gaze narrowed, and he shifted, the lava beneath him bubbling as he unfurled his wings slightly, casting shadows that flickered across the cavern walls. "You seek my aid to extinguish a fire," Ignis rumbled, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Yet fire is my nature, dwarf. Why should I wish to quell it?" Thrain held his ground, feeling the heat intensify around him. as if the dragon's very breath was testing his resolve. "This fire is not of natural making," he replied, his voice steady. "It is not the fire that brings warmth or the flame that forges metal. This fire feeds on the life of the forest, consuming the very heart of the elven realm. It threatens the balance of all that lives there, and I fear it may grow beyond control." Ignis tilted his head, a thoughtful glint in his ember-like eyes. "And what is this balance to me, dwarf? I have slumbered here for centuries, untouched by the worries of elves or men. My fire is mine to command, and I owe loyalty to no creature." Thrain felt a spark of desperation, but he did not falter. He knew that the dragon's trust would not be won with mere words. "If you are as ancient and wise as they say," he said, his voice tinged with respect and urgency, "then you know that balance in the world of mortals affects all things, even those of fire. The forest burns with a magic unlike any I have seen. Without your help, this fire may consume more than just trees. It may threaten even the mountain itself." The dragon watched him in silence, his gaze unfathomable. For a moment, Thrain thought he might be cast out, that his plea would go unanswered. But then slowly, Ignis lowered his head, and the heat around them softened, like a forge cooling in the night air. "Very well," the dragon said, his tone as heavy as the earth. "I will consider your request, but only if you prove yourself worthy. Fire is not given freely, and it does not bend to the will of those who cannot endure its touch. I will grant you a trial, dwarf. If you survive, I shall lend you my strength." Thrain felt a thrill of both fear and resolve. He nodded, bowing slightly. "I accept your challenge, Ignis." The dragon's lips curled in a faint, fiery smile. "Then prepare yourself, brave dwarf, for the trial of flames awaits you, and only those with a heart of iron may hope to pass." And with that, the dragon turned, his massive form shifting as he beckoned Thrain toward the heart of the cavern, where flames leapt and danced, casting their enigmatic shadows upon the walls. The cavern was alive with fire. It leapt from wall to wall, coursing along the molten veins like blood through ancient stone, illuminating the depths in shades of crimson and gold. Thrain felt the air grow heavy, pressing against his skin, with a heat that seemed to probe every weakness, testing his resolve. His instincts whispered of danger, urging him to flee, yet his heart remained steady. This was a trial he could not escape, a path only his own courage could forge. Ignis circled him slowly, his massive form casting a shadow that flickered like a living flame. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter as he spread his wings, summoning flames that twisted and gathered in a circle around Thrain, creating a pathway of burning embers that stretched forward into the heart of the cavern. "This is the trial of flames," Ignis declared, his voice reverberating through the stone, a melody of heat and power. To walk this path unshielded, to bear the fire's touch without retreating, is to show that your heart is steadfast. Only then will I know if you are worthy of the fire's blessing. Thrain nodded, swallowing the dryness in his throat. He understood that this was no simple test of bravery. It was a test of spirit, of enduring what few mortals dared to face. Without armor or protection, he would step into the flames, trusting only his own will to carry him forward. The path stretched before him, a ribbon of fire that beckoned with both beauty and danger. He took a breath, feeling the heat prickle his skin even from where he stood. His first step felt like crossing into another world, a world that belonged solely to Ignis, a place where flames ruled and flesh was but fleeting. With each step forward, the heat intensified. It seared through his boots, piercing the thick leather, licking at his skin as if tasting his courage. The fire coiled around him, wrapping him in tendrils of heat, testing the boundaries of his endurance. Sweat beaded on his forehead, stinging his eyes. Yet he kept walking, his gaze fixed on the path ahead. As he ventured deeper into the flames, memories rose within him, unbidden. He saw his home, nestled in the quiet valleys of stone and shadow. He saw his kin, their faces etched with pride and purpose, their voices calling to him, urging him onward. And beneath it all, he felt the ancient bond between dwarf and earth, a connection as old as the mountains, as enduring as the rock itself. But then the fire grew hotter, its touch sharper, and he faltered, his skin stinging, his vision blurring. Shadows seemed to dance within the flames, figures from his past and fears he had buried. The fire whispered of his doubts, of every flaw he had ever hidden from himself, of every moment he had chosen comfort over courage. "Will you yield, dwarf?" The voice of Ignis echoed, filling the cavern like a storm. "Will you flee from what lies within the flame?" Thrain's heart raced, yet he gripped his resolve tighter. He steadied himself, grounding his spirit like a mountain unshaken by the wind. "I will not yield," he murmured, his voice steady, though soft. The flames coiled around him once more, their heat sinking deeper, testing not just his flesh, but the very essence of his spirit. The pain was relentless, yet beneath it, he found something stronger, a determination, a clarity of purpose. He was here not for glory, nor even for himself, but for the forest and the lives it sheltered. His was a purpose beyond personal gain, a vow forged in his heart as solid as any iron. As if sensing his resolve, the flames began to change, their fierce brightness softening, becoming a warm glow that surrounded him like an embrace. The pain ebbed, and Thrain felt a strange calm settle within him, a peace that came from standing firm in the face of fear. The path of embers ended at his feet, and he stood on the other side of the trial, his body weary but his heart unyielding. Ignis watched him in silence, his eyes alight with a newfound respect. "You have endured, Thrain of the Dwarves," the dragon intoned, his voice softer now, a note of approval threading through his words. "You have proven that your heart is as steady as the stone, that your will is as fierce as the flame. For this, I shall grant you the fire's blessing." With a slow, deliberate motion, Ignis extended a claw and traced a symbol in the air, a shape that shimmered with fiery light. As the symbol hovered, glowing between them, Ignis reached into his chest and drew forth a single ember, small yet brilliant, pulsating with the heart of his own fire. He placed it within the symbol, and it transformed into a pendant, an amulet forged of flame itself. "This amulet bears my blessing," Ignis said, his voice resonant with power. "As long as you wear it, the fire will know you as a friend. It will shield you, guide you, and guard you. But remember, fire respects only those who wield it with purpose." Thrain accepted the amulet, feeling its warmth pulse against his palm, alive with the essence of the dragon. He placed it around his neck, and as it settled against his chest, a wave of energy flowed through him, soothing the burns and renewing his strength. "Thank you, Ignis," he said, bowing deeply, his voice filled with gratitude. "With your blessing, I shall face this fire and restore balance to the forest." The dragon inclined his head, a flicker of pride in his gaze. "Then go, Thrain, and know that the fire walks with you. But remember, fire is a gift and a burden, a force that gives and takes. Wield it wisely, for it can both save and destroy." With these words echoing in his mind, Thrain turned and began his journey back to the forest, the amulet glowing against his chest, a symbol of the alliance forged between dwarf and dragon. As he climbed from the depths of the cavern, he felt the flames within him now, a fire of purpose, of strength, and a promise to protect. The forest awaited Thrain's return, cloaked in a heavy, unnatural silence. The once lively calls of birds had fallen mute, and the gentle rustling of leaves had been replaced by the sinister crackling of flames that neither slept nor slowed. The magical fire continued to consume, its hungry light casting strange shadows that seemed to dance upon the trees. But this time, Thrain walked with purpose, his steps sure, the amulet of Ignis warm against his chest, pulsing with a quiet, steady heat. As he entered the heart of the burning forest, the flames shied away from him, flickering uncertainly, as if sensing the dragon's blessing. Thrain held his head high, moving through the fire, with the calm confidence of one who was no longer its enemy. The elves watched from the edges, eyes wide with wonder and hope, though they dared not approach, sensing something powerful and unfamiliar in Thrain's aura. Guided by the whispers of the fire, Thrain ventured deeper than any mortal had dared toward a place even the oldest of elves avoided. He followed the blaze as it twisted and surged, the flames leading him like a guide, each flicker speaking to him in a language of heat and light that he now understood. The forest opened before him like a great sacred hall, each step bringing him closer to the source of the enchantment that had awakened this unnatural fire. At last, he reached a clearing. In its center stood a gnarled tree, ancient and towering, its roots coiled deep into the earth like the tendrils of some forgotten being. The tree's bark shimmered with strange runes, symbols of power and protection that had long since lost their purpose. Yet, within its roots, half buried in the earth, Thrain saw the source of the fire, the Firestone. The Firestone was no ordinary relic. Its surface glistened like molten glass, shifting between shades of crimson and gold. Its energy was palpable, radiating in waves that pulsed in time with the heartbeat of the earth. It was an artifact of great magic, crafted by the elves in an age now forgotten, meant to guard and protect. But something had twisted it, and the power that once sheltered the forest had become a devouring flame, a magic turned against itself. As Thrain approached, he felt the amulet around his neck pulse with the fire of Ignis, a steady reminder of the dragon's gift. The flames around the Firestone seemed to recognize the dragon's blessing, retreating slightly, as if wary of its presence. But Thrain could feel the relic's power pressing against him, testing his resolve, seeking to challenge him. He took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of his purpose settle within him. This was the moment he had come for, the reason he had endured the trial of flames and earned the amulet's protection. Reaching out, he placed a hand upon the Firestone. Its heat was intense, yet it did not burn him. Instead, it filled him with visions of ages past, memories woven into the stone itself. He saw elves of ancient days, hands lifted in blessing as they chanted over the stone, imbuing it with the magic meant to preserve. But he also saw the slow corruption that had seeped into it over centuries. A dark energy feeding on the stone's power, twisting it until it could no longer recognize friend from foe. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his mind, cold and sharp, whispering promises of boundless power and dominion. It was the voice of the darkness that had claimed the Firestone, a presence that fed off its strength like a parasite. Thrain felt it try to take root in his heart, filling him with visions of wealth, of glory, of dominion over land and kin. But he steeled himself, grounding his spirit in the strength of his purpose. "You will not sway me," he murmured, his voice a whisper of iron. "I did not come for power. I came to restore what was lost." He felt Ignis's fire stir within him, the dragon's strength lending him resolve. Channeling that energy, he pressed his palm harder against the stone, summoning the blessing of the Fireborn Dragon. The amulet pulsed, growing hotter, as if Ignis himself was channeling his fire through Thrain's touch. Waves of heat and light poured from the amulet, flowing into the firestone, burning away the corruption that had tainted its core. The firestone resisted, its light flashing with a fury that tried to cast Thrain back. But he stood firm, his heart steady, his spirit unyielding. The corrupted energy surged one last time, shrieking as it sought to cling to its stolen power. But the dragon's fire was relentless, consuming the darkness, purging it from the stone's core. At last, the firestone settled, its surface cooling, its light dimming to a soft, warm glow. The flames that had once ravaged the forest faded into gentle embers, returning to their natural form, their purpose restored. The amulet around Thrain's neck cooled, the heat dissipating as the dragon's fire completed its work. As Thrain withdrew his hand, he felt a profound peace settle over the clearing. The forest's ancient magic stirred, renewing its bond with the earth, its balance restored. Thrain knew that the firestone would once again protect, not harm, the forest. The darkness had been banished, and the elven realm had been freed from its fiery curse. He turned, his heart swelling with quiet pride. The elves emerged from the trees, their eyes filled with awe and gratitude. Thrain met their gazes, nodding solemnly, knowing that the alliance between dwarf, dragon, and forest had brought them to this moment. He had fulfilled his promise, and now, with the forest at peace, his work was nearly complete. The forest, once ablaze with an unnatural fire, lay quiet now, soothed by the night's cool breath. Shadows shifted in the moonlight, and the remnants of embers glowed faintly among the trees, their heat now a gentle warmth rather than a destructive force. Thrain lingered in the clearing, his heart still thrumming with the weight of what had passed. The firestone, dormant once more, rested within the roots of the ancient tree, its light soft and calm, like the pulse of a sleeping heart. The elves gathered around him, their faces softened by relief and gratitude. They had watched the forest suffer, had felt its anguish as deeply as their own, and now, with its balance restored, a quiet joy settled over them. The elven maiden who had first led Thrain to Ignis approached, her silver hair glinting like starred dust in the faint glow of the embers. "You have done a great thing, Thrain," she said, her voice gentle and reverent. "The forest breathes again, thanks to you and the dragon's blessing." Thrain met her gaze, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "The fire was not mine to control," he replied humbly, his fingers brushing against the amulet at his chest. "It was Ignis's gift, his strength that healed this place. I was only the bearer of that fire." The maiden nodded, understanding the depth of his words. Yet there was an unspoken acknowledgement between them. Thrain had not only been a bearer, he had been the one to wield the dragon's fire with honor, to stand firm when lesser hearts might have yielded to the power's allure. As dawn began to color the sky in shades of soft pink and amber, the elves returned to the heart of the forest to tend to the trees and renew their ancient bonds. But Thrain knew his path led back to the volcanic caverns, to the dragon whose strength had made this healing possible. With a quiet farewell to the elves, he set out once more. The amulet's warmth, a steady reminder of his alliance with Ignis. The journey back through the forest felt lighter now, as though the land itself welcomed him. Grateful for his sacrifice, he traveled in silence, his thoughts lingering on the dragon's wisdom and strength, on the balance between flame and forest, and the lessons woven into his heart through fire and trial. Upon reaching the cavern entrance, he found Ignis waiting, his scales dimmed to a muted copper, his once brilliant glow softened by the sacrifice he had made. The dragon's gaze rested on Thrain, a glimmer of pride and weariness in his ember-like eyes. "The fire has settled," Thrain began, bowing deeply. "Your gift has saved the forest. The firestone is whole again, and its purpose restored." Ignis inclined his head, his breath a quiet rumble as he exhaled. "You have honored the fire well, Thrain. You wielded its strength with wisdom, a rare trait among mortals. But know that my power is now spent. It will be many years before my flame shines as it once did." Thrain nodded, feeling a pang of respect and gratitude for the dragon who had given so much to protect a world beyond his own lair. "I will watch over your cavern," he promised, his voice steady. "I will ensure that no harm comes to this place, that none disturb your rest." Ignis's gaze softened, and he regarded Thrain with something almost paternal. "Then let our bond remain, dwarf. Let it be known that between dragon and dwarf, an alliance was forged in fire and in purpose. May you carry this memory, and may it guide you." With those words, Ignis closed his eyes, folding his wings around himself, his body settling into a quiet stillness. His scales dimmed further, like embers settling into the ash, until he became almost indistinguishable from the stone around him. The cavern darkened, and the last flickers of light from Ignis's form faded, leaving only the faintest hint of warmth in the air, a promise of flame yet to return. Thrain stood in silence, feeling the depth of the dragon's rest, the power that now lay dormant within these stone walls. He touched the amulet once more, feeling its warmth against his chest. A final gift from the dragon that would protect him and remind him of their bond. He knew that the tale of this alliance would be told among dwarves and elves alike. A story of courage, sacrifice, and the delicate balance of fire and earth. With a last look at the cavern, he turned and made his way back to his people, carrying the memory of the dragon's fire within him. As he stepped from the cavern into the first light of dawn, he felt a quiet strength settle in his heart, a sense of peace born from his journey and the bond he had forged. In the years that followed, the forest flourished, its trees growing tall and strong, untouched by unnatural fire. The elves and dwarves spoke often of the tale, a story that grew into legend, of a dwarf and a dragon whose fates were entwined in a trial of flames, whose courage had saved the heart of the elven realm. And though Ignis slept within his cavern, his presence remained, a guardian spirit of fire and stone, honoured and remembered by those who walked in the forest's shade. And so, the balance was restored, the forest at peace. And Thrain's spirit, tempered by fire, lived on as a tale for generations, a reminder that even the fiercest flames can serve the gentlest of purposes, when wielded with honour and humility.